by the end of September 2021, I started sending out my first few requests for marketing stories, with the goal of having 50 stories in total. So my list was 200 companies long, and that extended to 280 companies.
Today I'm here with another guest. Her name's Sandra Nomoto, and a little bit about her backstory. While earning her degree in English literature, Sandra published poetry in literary journals and film reviews online. At 25, she founded Conscious Public Relations Incorporation, an award-winning virtual agency that's certified as a B Corporation. Congrats to that, by the way. That's dope.
Thanks.
After a decade in business, she authored and self-published The Only Public Relations Guide You'll Ever Need in 2019. Living vegan since 2018, Sandra is now a content writer and editor for vegan businesses who also helps vegan and spiritual nonfiction authors. She aspires to eat vegan food around the world and blog about it, and lives in East Vancouver, Canada with her husband. Welcome, Sandra. Nice to have you.
Thanks. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, June.
The pleasure is mutual. There's so many things to talk about with you. And since our episodes are limited to 30 minutes to keep them digestible, I want to dive right in. And I want to talk about the hottest topic that is like on my mind the most recent book that you've published and launched. Do you want to tell us about the story, how that book came along, and introduce us to all the work you've done? Because I can imagine that a lot of your backstory has resulted in creating this book and writing this book. Do you want to share with us how you created this book and how that happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my second business as the content doctor in 2020, with the intention to write content. And now I do other services related to marketing, but all for vegan businesses because just living as a vegan and always being interested in marketing. I kind of felt that pull towards those two things and decided to give this business a try. And despite the pandemic, I was pretty successful in, still running, which is a good sign. So the idea for the book came in the spring of 2021. I went to an intuitive reader, as I usually do around the time of my birthday. So this is spring. And she said, the spirit guides are saying you're going to write a book. And I went, what? Because I had no idea for a book at the time. But I just kept thinking about it. Like, what could I possibly write this second book about? And so in the summertime, I thought about a book about marketing for the vegan industry. So I did some Googling, and not only was there not a book about this topic, there was only one business book catered to the vegan industry called Vegan Ventures by Katrina Fox, published in 2016. So I read her book. And that really inspired me and really kind of gave me that kick in the ass to get my book going, because she proved that this model works, and the idea of using stories from other vegan businesses and then basically turning that into a book. That was the idea that I had. And so I was like, all right, she's done it. She's created the model. And so by the end of September 2021, I started sending out my first few requests for marketing stories, with the goal of having 50 stories in total. So my list was 200 companies long. And that extended to 280 companies, because if I didn't hear back from a company, even after following up, or if they said no to the opportunity, I just had to keep asking more. So the list was almost 280 companies long. In the end, I got back 47 stories. So not quite the 50 that I was hoping for. However, I found a lot of gaps in my book. So I wanted at least one example of a marketing tactic that I talked about. And so I just ended up pulling from what I could find online. And then I got permission to use those stories. And then I threw in a lot more other examples just for fun. So, or names of businesses for fun. So in total, yeah, there's close to 100 examples of vegan businesses and what they're doing to market themselves in 2021, 2022. So that's how it all came together.
Wow, that's so cool. The book is called Vegan Marketing Success Stories, and I'll leave everybody with the links to check it out and to get a copy to buy it. You have digital and you have it printed, like
And
in
audio
video
as well.
and audio as well. Did you read it yourself?
I did not. I wish I could have. Just yeah, the job of narrators is so tough. But I hired a vegan narrator, which is super cool. And then we found that you also need some sound engineering help when you do an audiobook. And I was fortunate to have been on Fred Ferris's Plant Your Seed podcast and saw that he did some sound engineering, and he doesn't normally do this, folks, so don't start knocking on his door, but yeah, he was able to help me. And so and it was really important to me to have not only a vegan book like printed on vegan ink, but also everyone involved, from my cover designer to my editor, is also vegan. So I'm super proud to say, like, yeah, everyone around the book I had a vegan team around me. So
That's amazing. And that's very aspiring because I know a lot of vegan business owners or founders or CEOs of any vegan related or purely vegan based business are having that issue that they like their team is not fully vegan. And for me, it's also very important that the people I work with are vegan because I just want to pay it forward and I want to be supported and support the vegan community. So that's really cool to hear that you managed how to do that. One thing that you said before I want to point out, because I know a lot of our listeners are also interested into mindfulness and spirituality and topics around that. You said you went to visit your healer or your guide, and they told you, your spirit guides are saying you got to write a book. And I see you're also wearing a beautiful mala here for everybody who's watching on YouTube. Could you show it for us real quick?
oh
Beautiful mala around your neck. Beautiful, very grounding colors. So what's your story with spirituality? Like, how did you get into that? And how does that relate for you to veganism and to your work, your business?
Wow, what a huge question.
Yeah, there we go.
So I was raised Catholic. So as a Filipino, yeah, Filipinos are big into not just Christianity, but specifically the Catholic religion. And so I ended up going to Catholic school for 13 years. I don't practice the religion now. However, I do attribute that foundation to my spiritual practice now, I suppose. So yeah, and I distinctly remember the day that I decided to leave the church. It was like coming back from living a year on my own in Toronto, coming back home to Vancouver, and then going to the church that I grew up in as a child. And for some reason, I would think it might have been the second or third mass that I went to, the priest talking about how, like, we're not down with homosexuality or gay people. And at the time, two of my best friends had recently come out as gay. And yeah, I just remember sitting there going, no, I think we're done here. God and I are taking our relationship out of this building and into another sort of form. And so yeah, I think it was like, I suppose years after that, I started getting into yoga, which then kind of introduced me to meditation. So I didn't really have like a structured practice. Many years later, I learned TM. And then now I sort of have my own, kind of meditation practice that involves affirmations and visualizations and chakra work. And but yeah, around that time that I started learning meditation and getting a lot big into self-development as well, reading a lot of books like Eckhart Tolle's and watching Oprah and all of this, that's when I was introduced to the idea of intuitives. So I've been fortunate to kind of cross paths with many. There's actually quite a few here in Vancouver where I live, but this one particular intuitive that kind of gave me the reading that my spirit guides were kind of pointing me in the direction of a second book. She actually has quite a regular practice where she'll offer people free of charge twice a month to kind of have a short reading with her. It's not like an intense 1 hour. And that's the one that I usually pop into every year around the time of my birthday.
Oh, that's so lovely. That's a part of your birthday gift for yourself.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, and then a year later I said, like, okay, all right, like, give me another reading. Like, just make sure it's not like the homework that I had last year, because a book takes like over a year to produce. And so it's like, I don't need another one of these projects.
Yeah, no.
But along with the intuitive readings, I do feel a very strong call to my ancestors, who I call my spirit guides. And they pop into my meditations every now and then and give me like really big messages. Actually, starting the Content Doctor came out of a meditation. And so I feel like really spiritually connected with them, and meditation is specifically the way I feel like I channel them.
Wow. I can relate so much to like how you describe your journey, and all of a sudden you start kind of figuring these puzzle pieces and it leads you to this connection to the divine or the spirit guides. I literally just hopped off a call with a client before our interview, and we were talking about chakra work and connecting to the higher self and to spirit guides and stuff. So fully on topic over here as well. You mentioned that the Contact Doctor, or this vision, was born in a meditation. And I want to highlight that because I believe and I observe how a lot of these powerful creations or businesses are always based on a lot of like enlightened beliefs or strengthened beliefs in the minds of entrepreneurs and creators like you and I. And so for me, it's always very important to kind of bridge this mindful woo-woo spiritual world to the actual impact and the businesses and the influence that we can have as vegans, especially in this world. So do you want to tell us about that moment of epiphany in that meditation? Because I think that's really interesting, since a lot of our listeners have great ideas, but maybe don't have the clarity yet to give them a shape. You know, they're like, yeah, maybe I'm going to write a book one day, or maybe I'm going to host a podcast one day. But to get that crystal clarity for the next steps, I think is what our vegan community needs in order to grow. So do you want to take us back to that moment of this epiphany, and maybe share with us a little bit about the kind of meditation practice that you do to bring all listeners closer to this kind of work?
Sure. So I'll start with, I guess, my meditation practice. So very similar to the TM structure, I still have carried that with me. So before breakfast and before dinner, so this is twice a day for 20 minutes. I'll sort of sit, do a bit of breath work. I have affirmations that I say twice a day as well. They're 10 affirmations. And then I'll sort of like do chakra visualizations going from the root upwards. And then I'll say my mantra for the remainder of that 20 minutes. So that's what my practice looks like. And I distinctly remember the very moment that I got this download. So this was in late 2019. I hadn't yet started this new business. I was working sort of as an admin assistant and writer for a few freelancing for a few different companies in town. And this was after I closed my first business. So I didn't think I was going to start a new or continue working in the marketing industry. So initially I thought about writing for the vegan outlets. your veg news and all of that. So I did some research and found that not all of these outlets pay their writers. And at best, unless I applied for like a full-time staff writer position, which I was not comfortable doing, I might be able to make a part-time income, like as a freelance writer. So I was sort of discouraged by my research. and then I sat down to meditate. And that's when that booming intuitive voice said, "You're vegan now and you'll be writing forever." Like whether, like I've always been a writer, whether it's, as a child, as you said in my bio, I wrote a lot of poetry and short stories, and then that morphed into a business in public relations. So writing is always a skill that I'm going to have regardless of whether or not I use it professionally. But just those two things just like rang so true in my head. It was like my spirit guides were like, "Don't F this up." Like, we're giving it to you. Don't F it up. And yeah. And I even thought, like, immediately after that, I came out of the meditation, I was like, oh, like I've got a website. I can just throw up a service page on my website, tell everybody I know, because I've got a network from my previous business, and just start to ask, hey, who do you know who runs a vegan business, who needs help with their written content? And that's how I started out. And that's evolved as it will. Your ideas and your whatever you start will always evolve. But but I'll never forget that first intuitive hit that started everything.
Thank you for taking us back there to the seed of what now has been grown and established. I think it's always really beautiful to see where it started, because I know a lot of vegans out there, as I said before, have these ideas and we don't know how to get started, or we don't know if that's really the purpose, if that's really what we want to or should focus on, and how spirituality and your spirit guide, your ancestors, have provided you with the certainty of this is your path, walk it. Here's the path, you walk it, right? So that's why I also love meditation and mindfulness practices, because they really generate this clarity of what's the next step. And since both of our hearts, and I can say for almost all of our listeners, if not all of them by this moment, our hearts beat for a better world, for animal rights, for human rights, for the planet, right? And I'm vegan for the animals mainly, but obviously I'm also vegan for everything else that benefits, the world, the planet. And so thank you for sharing that little insight. If you want to have more information on that, all the contact details to both Sandra and I will be in the show notes or the description. Just reach out to us and ask. Another thing I would love to talk to you about is, you've brought in your skill of writing, which is a really potent skill to use for creating a better world. And you brought it in a shape through the message of your spirit guides that I see as vegan activism. I see what you're doing as you're driving impact, you're helping people get closer to veganism, and you're doing it in a rather unique way, which for most people, when they hear activism, they don't think of that. And that's why we're also here. I kind of want to blow the limits of what we believe is activism and what we believe can create impact. So you are just a perfect example of how a different way of approaching activism can work and function and inspire a lot of people worldwide. So I would love to zoom into your newest book. And you said you've connected with so many vegan businesses. You've looked into their strategy, I'm guessing. You've looked at, how their marketing works. If there's any core piece of advice that, let's say, fresh entrepreneurs, vegans that are starting or growing a business, any advice for them to move forward, like one core thing that you've learned through writing and creating this book?
Wow. I know there's a lot in there. So I'm not going to attempt to distill it, but I will say, yeah, when I reached out when I had this list of companies, I was imagining that I was hoping to get a range of stories from like the solopreneur all the way up to the big corporations who maybe have like a 6-figure marketing budget. How it happened was most of the companies that responded were small to medium size. And so that's great for the folks who are just new in their business maybe, or are running a company of that size and just want more ideas on how to either start their marketing strategy or how to add to what they're already doing. And so this is a really great guide into just either creating or refining the strategy that you may already have, and hopefully give you the inspiration from all of the vegan businesses that are in the boat with you. Because I know that as a vegan, when you're in non-vegan circles, it can feel very alone. And this wasn't even a goal of my book, but I feel like as a result of putting it out there and connecting with all of the readers of the book, when you find a community, you really feel less alone as a vegan. And so that's what I'm hoping that the book does for anyone, whether you're a marketer, you're not vegan, maybe marketing for a vegan company, to the startup founder who's vegan and is new to the whole thing. I created the first chapter is called Marketing Basics, which initially I wasn't going to write, but because of the nature of some of the stories that I got, we do start with, what should you call your company? Should you have the word vegan in it? So I really appreciate that. There's a lot of basics in there, and then all the way up to, whatever else you can do with with the budget that you have. So there's a lot of different range of tactics. And everyone's strategy is different. I think that's there's my one big lesson that I learned, is that
we got there.
no one's strategy is the same. Everyone's using a different combination of marketing tactics. So even if you would try to copy your competitor and do exactly what they're doing, your audience is going to be a little bit different. So you just got to create your own, test, keep doing what works, and then throw away, or at least delay what doesn't work.
Whoa, that is potent. And I love that we got there. I know that's a big question.
I circled around and I got there.
And we had to go on a little journey to get to the core of an answer for that question. And there's two keywords that you said that I want to highlight. You said tactics and strategy. And the reason why that stands out for me is because in our vegan community, through my perspective and how I view it and how I see how our community is growing, engaging with each other and developing themselves in whatever shape or form that is, if it's a business or just as an individual, right? I see that a lot of vegans are so heart-centered, that will never change. We're always connected to the heart. We're coming from compassion. Most of us are, right? And we care. We just care, period. One thing, though, that I see is very often lacking, and why I'm very grateful to meet people like you, Sandra, is because you bring strategy and tactics into the game. And I think there is no way to scale anything without tactic and strategy. And if we're looking at it through the lens of business linguae, let's say, and we want to scale veganism, we need strategy and tactics. And that's what kind of was like my vision to host this podcast, is investigate. How can we strategically veganize people faster? Not taking the human out of, another human, but what ways are there to help the world go vegan faster? Because that's the goal that we're all, that we all are working for. And the way you shape your activism is definitely a very potent way to do that. So as you just said before, anybody who's inspired, don't copy her exactly. Use your own skills, use your own talents, and bring them into shape. That can be writing, that can be speaking, that can be creating content, that can be going on the streets doing outreach. Maybe that's your forte. So finding your zone of brilliance is something that I want to help everybody who's listening here do, and why I think it's so beautiful for you to highlight the way that you found for yourself, or let's say the spirit guides found for you and put you on track. So thank you for bringing strategy and tactics to the game. One more question that I have for today in this podcast episode is, when we're looking at, like we talked about spirituality, you gave us a little insight on how that has actually served you as a vegan impact driver in this world. right? So for everybody who has no connection to spirituality, remember, it is a tool, or it is, let's say, it is a way for you to become more impactful as a vegan. And that shows up in so many different ways. And then we also looked a little bit about strategy and tactics. And I think they go so very much hand in hand. So I know that most of our listeners here are like, their perspective, as I said before, of activism is you're going on the streets. And a lot of our listeners maybe don't see themselves as activists. So through your research and through creating this book, through writing it and connecting with oh so many vegan businesses and entrepreneurs and creators and writers, I would love to ask you to just give us like a little overview of what kinds of activisms that you have discovered by creating that book, just to kind of like expand the possibilities for our listeners. So what kind of people have you interviewed? What kind of businesses have you connected with?
Wow. So yeah, like I said, it's a big range. I also wanted a good geographic range of businesses around the world, male, female, whatever gender owned. I will say the book is just, it's how it turned out. Most of the businesses are in North America, Europe. Yes, those two continents. However, I'm just really stoked that I got a few in Israel. I think one in Mexico, two in India. Yeah, so yeah, I got a bit more of a range. Katrina in Australia. Yeah. And so yeah, you'll get a whole range of solopreneurs all the way up to, let's say the medium-sized business. So no matter where you are, if business is your form of activism, which it is for me, you'll get a whole range of those types of stories. And in terms of being an activist, I 100% agree. When I first went vegan, I thought an activist was exactly what you said, somebody who holds signs outside maybe a slaughterhouse, or who rescues animals, or folks who do the Cube of Truth. But yeah, I think everyone, like you said, has got their zone of brilliance. And when I first went vegan, before I started this business, I had my blog. My blog is all I had to communicate these thoughts with people. And and I had folks read it. So people learn about why I went vegan. And there's a woman who runs the Plant-Based Briefing podcast. She reached out and said, hey, I do voiceover podcasts. I would like to use your blog and narrate some of your blog posts. And that's another way that my writing has gotten further. And so as a result of starting this business and now publishing this book, I feel like now speaking and teaching has become an extension of what used to be just writing and maybe helping vegan businesses with their content, because I have to do interviews like this and get my book out there. And and one thing that happened was I did a Veganuary related release back in December, and I emailed it to, a bunch of business media. It didn't really get huge pickup, but somebody on my newsletter list worked for a local, like a province-wide TV network, like quite a big, one of our big networks here in BC, forwarded it to another producer. And then they invited me on to talk about Veganuary in January. And you don't say no to these opportunities as a as a vegan. And also I have a PR background. So I used to be the one to coach my clients on here's how to do a media interview. Now I find myself the person in front of the camera, but I'm using all of these things that I used to teach people, and now I'm doing it for myself, right? But I feel like it's for a cause that's outside of me. I may be the vessel, I may be the medium for that message, but who knows, like hundreds of thousands of people who watch that 4-minute segment and and then may think twice about, hey, like veganism is a thing. I learned something today, and here's why people go vegan. So you just never know the ripples that you're going to have. even staying in your zone of brilliance, as you said, because I think everybody can be an activist. It just depends on the skills that you have and want to develop.
Amen to that. Period. I love how I love exclamation mark. Amen. I love how you highlight that, the skills that everybody has. And I'm sure everybody listening right now can relate and is possibly reflecting on, what skills do I have? What did I learn? What kind of backgrounds do I have? And it is much easier for us to start finding a shape or form to bring those skills into a business, or influence an existing business, or influence, the workspace where we're in, by bringing that forward. So you're writing, you mentioned speaking, and then of course we have street outreach, and then we have online content creators, we have translators. You even said somebody hosts a podcast who is reading out existing articles on veganism, plant-based news, etc. So there's like just a couple of examples on how activism looks like. And in your words, to just phrase you on that or quote you on that, you never know the ripple effect of it. And I believe if you're in your zone of brilliance, and if you're using your unique skills, your talents that you already bring to the table, and you infuse them, like I studied graphic design. That's like my previous background before I founded my life coaching business. And when I transitioned from working full-time to freelance and then into life coaching, in that transition phase, I said, I want to work for vegan companies. I started creating banner designs for demonstrations. I started creating online content, visuals for activism organizations, animal rights movements, etc. So each and every skill you have can be applied in a way that it helps veganize the world. And I think that's the core message that we got down to today. And I am very happy and grateful that you gave us this insight. So people can find your book. It's down in the show notes. It's down in the description of this video. If you're watching us on YouTube, go and get it if you feel inspired by this conversation. It's definitely worth, and it will expand your mind a lot. Also, when people want to reach out to you, Sandra, how do they do that best? Like, how do they reach out to you best? What platforms do they use?
I'm pretty much on every platform, although probably most active on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And that's easy to find me just with my name, Sandra Nomoto. And then same thing for all my services in the book, just my website, sandranomoto.com.
Perfect. Go check her out, and we'll be in touch with you if you reach out to her or to me. My website is down in the show notes and in the bio as well. I want to thank everybody for listening to this today. Is there any last message you want to preach to our listeners? Any last words of inspiration?
No, I think just thank you for being vegan if you're listening and that's your path. And thank you for using whatever skills that you have for the movement, because everything counts, as we've discussed. So thank you.